world where you can be anything, choose to be kind. What a thoughtful quote to start today's session. Welcome to another truly inspiring episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. Today, our show, we have with us a well-known personality who is vivacious, charming, and easy to talk to. Her energy is something we could all use a dose of. This animal lover and pet parent to her dog Jogi is a believer of kindness to animals, to others, and to oneself. This enthusiastic person has covered major news stories ranging from the devastation of the 2004 tsunami, the Mangalore air crash, the crimes and death of Veerappan, floods in Karnataka and Kerala, the farmers' distress. She has worked on international assignments, which include the swearing in of Nelson Mandela in Pretoria, South Africa in 1994. She has also reported from Malaysia on the ASEAN Summit, from Hong Kong, Brazil, South Africa, USA, and the Czech Republic on annual international educational events. And let's not forget the Wall Street protests in New York and Washington were also reported by her. I'm delighted to announce the presence of none other than Maya Sharma from the very first batch of trained, yes, dear friends, trained TV journalists, and now the resident editor of the NDTV Bangalore. Welcome to the show, Maya. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me today.
Having completed a round of over 3 decades, Maya, and in this field, what is it like venturing into this kind of completely new profession 3 decades ago? It hasn't been easy. It's okay for people here to have a curriculum and to have some kind of role models like you to go by. How was it when you had to actually cut your path and say, this is how I'm going to go? Create opportunities for yourself and then hold on to them. Must have been so difficult, Maya. How did you manage?
It was a very exciting time. Yes, we had nobody really to follow or no set path because television journalism was very, very new in India back in the late 1980s. We had Doordarshan, of course, which was largely government coverage. Coverages had been, prepared and permitted by the government. There was very little chance for a reporter to really go out there and do a story independently. We didn't have people who had done it before. So the 52 of us who were actually hired by Doordarshan back in those days to actually be trained at FTII in Pune and again at the CPC in Delhi, the Central Production Center in Delhi. We were the very first batch of formally trained television journalists in India. And after training, which took about 7 or 8 months, we were unleashed onto the television news world. And it was really exciting because what we were doing, we were the first to be doing that. The mistakes we made, we were the first ones to make those mistakes. The achievements we did, we were also the very first. Whether it was the very first live election telecast, live budget analysis, reports, edited stories, it was a very, very exciting time. Yes, a little nerve-wracking as well, because it was, of course, only one channel on air. And if anyone was watching television, they would be watching our channel and they would be watching us. So it was a very exciting, very challenging time. We made mistakes, we were pioneers, but it was something I would not exchange for anything.
Yeah, but Maya, there wasn't any kind of course. So when you say that you went for an IAS, then there was some kind of course. You went into military, there was some kind of course. You get in the morning, you get out onto that field, you have to do your exercise, you've got to come back, there's a parade, there's a march, and then of course there's some rifles, you shoot and etc. But when you get into this kind of television and then you said, now you're going to go here, you're going to shoot, and you're going to shoot the camera, how did you feel? You did not actually know what you are going to do, what kind of an assignment you're going to be put in. Did they make a difference between boys and girls or men and women, or all of you had to do any kind of assignment that you were put across, and even go in and do some kind of, you were there for that Veerappan kind of deadly gangster, but you did that. You did that disaster for that air crash. You also went in for the farmers' agitation. It wasn't easy. I mean, people think that, you got all that footage sitting down in some kind of remote place, but you were actually where that action was. How was that feeling, that adrenaline pumping? And then, you say, yes, you got these big pictures, etc. But at what cost?
We had to go to the field. We had to go to where the action was and report it. There was no difference in our training, whether it was a male reporter or a female reporter. We were trained the same way, whether it was all of us came from different colleges. We had different experiences and studies in mass communication and journalism. But in Pune, we were trained on the basics of television production and also taught reporting, field reporting, camera work, studio production and editing. In Delhi, we were taught again, had a further advanced course in field reporting, handling the camera and editing. Of course, my focus in my job has been on the reporting side, not so much the technical side. But we had to go everywhere, whether it was women or men, it was absolutely the same. We would go where we needed to go at any time we needed to go. The fortunate thing about television is, of course, it is teamwork. It is the embodiment of teamwork, really. You have a team with you whom you trust and whom you work with, whether it's the camera person, whether it's the person who's driving you around. And in earlier days, the teams were actually bigger. We also had a sound recordist. We had a lighting assistant. Later on, it became just the camera person and ourselves. But it's always a team. The reporter, the anchor is the person who is seen. But there's always a team who is doing a whole lot of work to make sure that the stories that the reporter, that the anchor actually get on air. And their support is invaluable at all times. And that was really very, very basic to us when we went out into the field.
Yeah, but Maya, I sort of wonder, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So you're on the field, there's something happening behind you, there's a whole lot of cacophony there, and yet you're holding the mic before you and you've got an NDTV symbol on it. And then, you're actually speaking on behalf of NDTV, and you don't have a written speech there because obviously there is so much of action going on. And then you get that entire kind of attention on you. You know the number of people watching the television, and you've got a speech there which is not ready-made or not cut out for you, and you're there on the side. Now, how do you prepare this thing? And how do you actually say that I'm going to say this, and how do you curate that thing?
You have to be quick on your feet. You have to think on your feet. You have to have the language to actually respond to the situation, to understand what is going on, and to translate it simply for the audience who may not have a deep background of what exactly the story is. For that, you need to know the background of the story when you're going into it. You need to have done your research on the overall topic. Of course, in breaking news situations, you have to react to what is happening around you. You have to respond to what is going on around you. It is very, very important. Of course, it can be nerve-wracking. It can be the very early days, of course, of live television was very nerve-wracking indeed, very exciting. And I remember, in fact, the very first time I went live, it was with Lawrence Fernandes during one of the election live reports, which were done between Doordarshan and NDTV. And Mr. Lawrence Fernandes was telling me about what he was making allegations about irregularities at a voting booth. And I was trying to ask him, in which constituency was this? And then I suddenly had this feeling, my goodness, I'm on live television. Possibly millions of people are actually watching me around the country. And I panicked and I couldn't get the word constituency out. So I asked him, which and I just went on like that for a couple of seconds. And he very kindly took pity on me and said, which constituency? And I said, yes. So initially, especially, it was quite nerve-wracking, but you get used to it. And you begin to see the camera as your friend and to know that you're talking to people who want to hear what you have to say, who want to know the situation on the ground. So it gets easier as it goes along. But initially, yes, it was quite exciting and sometimes scary.
Yeah, and also, I note from your education, you did go through a science degree, a bachelor in science. Did that help you in any way?
It helps me in the sense if I'm approaching story which involves some science, for example, the amount of reporting we've done on COVID, the COVID pandemic, a little bit of a scientific background has helped with some of the stories which have a scientific basis to them, which require a little bit of the understanding of basics. It has. Otherwise, really, it's just I've been fortunate enough to report on a wide spectrum of issues, especially those of us in the bureaus. We report on everything from politics to sports to business to arts to science to all kinds of things. So that way, the CBZ, the chemistry, botany, and zoology has not been directly applied. But I think perhaps the way of any education really helps you formalize your thoughts, helps you present your thoughts clearly. And it has been a help when I'm doing stories that do have a scientific basis in them.
Maya, another question which is quite sensitive. Compared to media maybe 2 decades ago to media today, where has media ethics gone? Is it because of the competition that is there or the TRP? Everything becomes a breaking news. It breaks the mindset of people as well. Is it because the public watching or the TRP is sort of rigged, or, the way in which news that is sad is presented like as though it's a celebration with all the noise and the hoopla around it? I think, it used to be so sedate and it used to be so authentic. People are not ready to even sort of go in to see the authenticity and credibility of the news. But even before anything happens, it's breaking news and dun, 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 all this music coming in. Now, why? I mean, what do you think, Maya? Because you've been a very serious journalist, and when you're reporting, obviously you do all your homework. What do you think of the current, place of ethical journalism?
That is a very important question at this stage, and I do feel that unfortunately the way television news is presented has taken a turn for the worse in recent years. I do hope it is a temporary phase. I do hope we get back to some of the way it was before. The audience now, the younger audience especially, has got used to something happening all the time, things changing all the time. They would not perhaps be ready to accept the sedate news presentation of the years ago, whether it was Doordarshan or the early private channels. It was very sedate, as you said, very sober in its presentations. People's attention spans are shorter now. There is so much coming in with social media, something going on all the time. People may not have the patience to watch the way it was, but I think we certainly do need to scale down the, if I could use a term, hysteria of the way news is presented now. People may not yet have all the facts. They may not yet know what the actual truth is, but it's out there with captions and noise and breaking news and people raising their voices and raising the decibel level and raising that hysteria level. And I think that is a very dangerous trend, because television is a very, very powerful medium. And when people see things, they can also get excited and can have quite disastrous consequences for other human beings as well. I do think we need to scale it down. I do hope the hysteria is a passing phase. Maybe it is, because television channels think that this is what the people want and this is what that they need to be given. But I think if people do make it clear that what they want to see, that they want to see serious content, valid content, relevant and credible content, then I think perhaps television channels will also change accordingly and maybe tone things down a bit. But I do think that it is disturbing the way breaking news is presented sometimes on some channels, and that we do need to have that sobriety, that seriousness about serious issues.
I think, Maya, you really hit the nail on the head. But going deeper into this, why is it that even now, today, sleaze, women, and kind of like today, for example, I just happened to put on the television, some of the local channels, they said breaking news 3. And what was the breaking news 3? Today is Varamahalakshmi Puja. And then, of course, people are celebrating. And of course, Afghanistan has got a lot of problems and there is a lot of killing. Now tell me, what is the breaking news in that? However, everything becomes breaking news. So are we breaking what? So I was just asking myself this question as I was coming today to interview you. So if it is a puja, I don't think it becomes breaking news. However, if you look at, say, somebody gets sort of murdered, okay? or if, say, for example, a bridge collapses, okay? Nothing is said about that. But say, for example, and I take you to a different story, Maya, a woman who comes in a very moribund state with, say, for example, a hemoglobin of, say, 4 grams, is not at all treated properly in the periphery, comes into a nursing home and then dies because she is in that condition when she comes there. They go ahead and ransack that particular nursing home and say that the doctor is negligent. And then the television crew come and just do a whole lot of, filming, and that goes on to these televisions, and they keep on doing it, and then make the doctor look like as though he's a criminal. And yet there are so many people who die in, say, for example, a bridge collapses, but nobody ever blames the engineers there. Everyone gets scot-free. But there's always a court to find out whether a doctor is actually, negligent or not. But, here the mob takes it and the television crew helps them. And do you think this is right or wrong? Where does the doctor stand in all this, Maya?
Well, of course, there are television channels and television channels. It's not everybody who does this.
No, not at all.
Certainly, it is a very disturbing way the attacks on medical professionals have been happening. We've seen it a lot also during this COVID time, and we've had young resident doctors and doctors in Karnataka also protesting, demanding that kind of security, demanding that the government gives them that safety because they're out there doing their work. And I'm absolutely sure that no doctor wants their patient to die or wants to not be able to treat their patient, which is very, very sad that there are attacks on doctors happening. When there is a ransacking, when there is something like that happening, it is the duty of the television news channel or the newspaper, whoever is reporting it, to go and reflect the actuality of the situation, to find out what happened, to present both sides. But at no time is it acceptable to ransack property, to attack a person. Nobody can take the law into their own hands. And it definitely is required that medical professionals in Karnataka, around India, across the world, are protected while they are doing their job. If there has been any malpractice, it can be investigated and sorted out, but patients and patients' families cannot attack, should not attack nursing homes and hospitals and make the already challenging work of the doctor more difficult, especially at this time of the pandemic. It isn't acceptable, and doctors are absolutely right in demanding more protection and more laws to actually protect them in their work.
In fact, Maya, I sometimes wonder, when we take the Hippocratic Oath, we always say that we will protect the patients right to the end. In fact, many of our doctors who are the frontline warriors that have actually laid down their lives to save the patients have then been massacred only to be saving other people's lives. And then the doctors lose confidence and say, what is the use if we come up there? We are not even given insurance. For if in case we land up with COVID. And in fact, there is a rule for a doctor who has COVID that they have to take less number of days leave, but they still can come with double masking, but they still have to go and look after patients. But the patients the general public have to stay at home. They have to look after themselves. They have to put their masks and they should not venture out. But doctors can go. They have to treat all these people. And yet when doctors get hammered, the government turns the other way. Is it right that the doctors have to demand security, or is it the government who demands doctors to come to work in spite of a pandemic to provide security even before the doctor? It is the government that has to provide the security. Doctors don't have to ask for it. I think there is a mismatch in what is happening.
All essential workers, whether doctors, nurses, medical staff, hospital staff, policemen, journalists, frontline workers who have been working in the delivery industry right from the start of the pandemic, they all deserve an absolutely safe environment. They need the guarantee of safety. And the government has to be involved to make sure that that safety is provided, that there should be no extra stress on people who are already putting their lives at risk by going out at the time of the pandemic. Things are opening out now, of course, but at the harshest point of the lockdown, the toughest time of the lockdown, essential workers were still out there, not quite knowing what COVID meant, not quite knowing how contagious it was, Essential workers have been out there from the start of the pandemic last year, and they deserve to be able to work in peace.
Thank you very much, Maya, because you have said that just equivocally that all these frontline workers and all these people, whether it is the policemen or the essential service workers who have been looking after the essential services, have been doing a great job, and they should be respected. Now let's just go on to another thing, Maya. It is said that until one has loved an animal and a part of one's soul remains unawakened, we've read a lot about your Jogi, and at the end, my views, and I would love to hear from you. How is it that you've always felt? See, dogs are always such lovely animals, and they are ones that whatever you do, if you really want a wafadar, that means a person who's really going to be sincere to you, they always say have a dog, because you can't get a better person than a dog to be sincere to you. So my question to you is slightly different. Do you think that adopting a dog is better than buying a dog?
Most definitely for many reasons. First of all, a rescue dog, if we can use that term, although of course very often the dog rescues us emotionally, but a dog who is on the street, a puppy who is on the street, is so vulnerable to hunger, to accidents, to being attacked by other animals, to being hit by vehicles. Giving that dog a home, a food, a regular food, a shelter is so very, very important. You're giving that dog a chance at a safe and comfortable life. And in return, you'll be getting so much love, so much unconditional love. It'll be amazing. Now, buying a dog, on the other hand, encourages what is very often a very, very cruel breeding industry. The breeding industry in India is not monitored properly. The dogs who are used for breeding are kept sometimes in terrible condition. They're kept in cages throughout their life. An active, healthy dog is kept in cages. The mother dogs are bred over and over and over again. There is breeding within the families as well. The mother may be bred with her brother, father, her son, which has of course gives a rise to a lot of physical defects among the puppies. The puppies who are not able to be sold are abandoned, they die. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a pedigree dog. All dogs are wonderful. But the breeding industry in India is a very, very cruel industry indeed. And when there are so many wonderful, loving, hardy, intelligent Indian dogs, we call them by many names, mongrels or street dogs or indies or Indian dogs. I mean, I think Indian dogs is just the right term for them. When there are so many millions of these wonderful Indian dogs who could do with love and a good home, I think if we could get everybody who has space in their home and in their heart for a dog to adopt an Indian dog from the streets, give it a chance, I think that would be wonderful. And it'll also help curb the often very cruel and unregulated dog breeding industry in this country.
So Maya, you feel that what about the sterilization program that the corporation had taken, but it's really not taken off? Do you know why it is not taken off, the sterilization program?
This is a very, very important program because the Supreme Court made it very clear that you cannot kill a street dog. In fact, here's one of mine here. That is one of my dogs just walking there behind me. The Supreme Court has made it very clear that you cannot kill a healthy street dog. And that used to happen decades ago. The corporation used to catch the dogs and kill them in the worst possible ways, by electrocution and other ways at all. But the court has made it clear you cannot kill a healthy street dog. It is illegal. But the numbers have to be controlled. So the ABC program, the Animal Birth Control Program, is hugely important for this. Now, the BBMP does some surgeries on its own. There are also NGOs who are engaged by the BBMP to actually carry out these surgeries. Many of these NGOs say that they have not been paid by the BBMP, that they have pretty much stopped or slowed down their work because they have their costs, whether it is the surgery itself, paying the doctor, housing the dog until it recovers, feeding the dog, the medication. There are costs as well. So while the process is on and it is very, very important, it is perhaps not as fast as it needs to be, because Nobody wants hundreds of street dogs on the road feeling hungry, feeling lost, vulnerable to vehicle injury. So the animal birth control program is really the core of making sure that India's street animals are taken care of, are looked after. Right now, they're supposed to be released in the area in which they were picked up. They will not breed, which means that there'll be thousands less of these unwanted and uncared for animals on the street. The animal birth control program needs to be given priority by the government, needs to have that funding, and NGOs with the good sense of it need to help in this to really help bring our stray animal issue under control, to make sure that there are fewer street animals suffering on the streets of our cities.
Yes, and another thing that I've seen here is going on to the dogs itself. Now, when you have a dog, which is a street dog, in fact, they're better, suited for our Indian conditions rather than pedigree. And if you were to take a street dog and a pedigree, the pedigree will not be able to stand infections as opposed to a street dog. And even the kind of food that you give to a pedigree has to be so hygienic when compared to a street dog. And I've seen many of the skin infections, ear infections, cancers, etc., come in more to the pedigrees compared to the street dogs. Maybe their antibody levels are high, maybe their infection, capacity to fight infections are better. I don't know. You have 9 dogs with you, Maya. So how do you manage?
Well, it is true that the dogs, the Indian dogs of the street, are very sturdy. They are adapted to the Indian conditions, to the Indian climate. They do, of course, need their vaccinations. They need their regular checkups. They need their care. They do need as much love and attention as all dogs do. But what is particularly sad is when you see dogs not suited to the tropics, whether it is huskies, whether it is St. Bernards, who are not equipped for the tropical heat. They should not be bred in India. They should not be sold in India, but they are. So you find huskies who are meant for a snowy, cold climate suffering in India's heat. They need air conditioning all the time. But do all the people who get huskies really keep them in coolness and air conditioning? I don't think so. So you find, tragically, these pedigree dogs, these lovely pedigree dogs, being abandoned because the people discover, oh, they require so much care, they require special food, they require a lot of food. St. Bernards are huge dogs, they need a lot to eat. It costs a lot. So we found that sometimes you find animals just being abandoned, which is the worst thing you could possibly do. It's the most cruel thing. If you're not looking after a dog, that is one thing. But to take a dog into your home, to feed it, to give it a sense of security, and then drive out and abandon it on a ring road because you don't feel like looking after it anymore, is the worst possible thing you can do to a dog. And that is happening too often to pedigree dogs. People buy a dog as a status symbol, not out of love, but as a status symbol to say, we have an Alsatian, we have a Husky, we have a St. Bernard, we have a Great Dane. They do that. Then when they find that it's not that easy looking after a living animal for 15 years, they abandon it. So that is really the danger. Our Indian dogs are sturdy, they're loving, they're adaptable, and really they are a wonderful choice for a pet for years to come.
I think, Vince, you learn a lot from dogs. What I mean by that is the fact that they give you unconditional love, and they don't expect anything in return, and they look after you. They know when you're sad, they know when you're happy. The way in which they react to you is by wagging their tail. They even cry with you. Their noises that they make, they show you that they actually feel with you. Have you noticed that with your dogs?
Absolutely. The unconditional love is there. When you get back from work, whether you had a good day, a bad day, a stressful day, whether it's been a tough day at the office, they are so happy to see you. And they show that joy in seeing you. But it could be after a full day, it could be after a week, it could be after you've gone out for a 5-minute walk also. They're just very happy to see you back. Yes, there are many things to learn from them. The unconditional love, the living in the moment. They are where they are. If they're sleeping now, they're sleeping. If they're eating now, they're enjoying their food. If they're going for a walk, they're looking around, they're enjoying everything they see. If they're getting petted or if they're coming close to you, that is all that they're doing at that time. They're totally living in the moment, which is something which most of us could really learn from them.